Madam Web is something. No matter your take on the movies, the characters, what Sony is trying to do, or why, one thing remains clear. And the word clear is important because there was no actual clear reason from a character standpoint as to why this movie needed to be made. The announcement of a potential Madam Web movie was pretty much met with the exact emotions that you would think it would garner: confusion, wonder, and skepticism among Marvel fans, Spider-Man fans, and movie enthusiasts alike. While Madam Web is an intriguing character within the Spider-Man universe, the prospect of a standalone film centered around her raised numerous concerns and doubts, which is why it's so weird that Sony couldn't see it, and seemingly ignored all the reasons why a Madam Web movie may have been ill-advised from the jump. Firstly, it speaks to poor awareness by Sony. Madam Web is a character deeply rooted in the lore of Spider-Man comics, yes, but lacks the mainstream recognition and popularity of other Marvel superheroes or villains. Unlike Spider-Man himself or iconic adversaries like Venom or Green Goblin, Madam Web occupies a relatively niche space within the Marvel universe. So introducing an audience to a character with whom they may not be familiar was always going to pose a significant challenge in terms of marketing and generating interest, especially considering the vast array of beloved characters already established in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well as Sony's. And then you have the question of why Madam Web and not other major villains or tweener characters. Sure, Venom made sense. He's extremely well known, even by the general moviegoer, and has been an anti-hero almost as much as a pure villain. But even though they do have moments where they've redeemed themselves, Morbius and Kraven still aren't major enough to have their own movies, even with Kraven's increased popularity thanks to the Spider-Man 2 game. So the same absolutely goes for Madam Web, who's even less known than those two. So in what world do Morbius, Kraven, and Madam Web get standalone movies over Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Kingpin? Or how about Black Cat, who's leagues above Madam Web in status and popularity? By the way, if you want Spider-Man to have his own Civil War type of movie, have him team up with the Defenders to take on Kingpin and the Hand, with Punisher and Black Cat as your in-betweeners who could take either side. I'm just saying, sounds like a moneymaker to me. But when we're talking about Madam Web, the character has always lacked the traditional elements of a superhero or supervillain, such as a compelling origin story or a clear moral alignment. Unlike Spider-Man or Iron Man, whose struggles and triumphs are deeply rooted in their identities and motivations, Madam Web's persona is a bit difficult to translate into a more relatable and emotionally resonant protagonist. And even then, one of her strongest central conflicts is her condition, and Sony basically ignores that till the very end of the movie. Furthermore, Madam Web's powers and abilities, centered around clairvoyance and precognition, present storytelling challenges that also don't translate that well to the big screen. While psychic abilities can certainly add depth and intrigue to a character, crafting a compelling narrative around them that requires careful execution, i.e. see Doctor Strange, and even that character struggled with it, Madam Web really couldn't do that without creating a storyline that would have ended up being a little bit more esoteric. And it seems like this was something that Sony knew, but if that's the path you're going to take, the new characterization needs to be something that people can attach themselves to. And while I saw the movie, you don't actually need to know that they didn't do a good job of this. The trailer alone gives it away. So when you consider the niche appeal and storytelling challenges that are so big that you had to completely switch up the characters, and the fact that they used Madam Web over more popular anti-heroes and villains, it starts to become clear. Sony needs to make Spider-Man Extended Universe movies, and we all know it. Similar to Batman for DC, Spider-Man has one of the deeper extended universes with a host of villains, anti-heroes, and support characters, which Sony has the rights to. But that's all Sony has. So they need to leverage as much as they possibly can out of the Spider-Man universe. They don't actually care about the characters, their popularity, or viability. They just want to get as much money as they possibly can. And thus, Madam Web was created, because they can take advantage once again, as well as add as many Spider-Man elements into it to try and lure people in. I'm just not so sure it's going to work, because after all, most properties don't without the main character that it's supposed to be centered around. You know what the craziest thing about Sony is? At one point, they actually had the chance to buy most of the MCU and basically said no because they thought nobody cared about it except for Spider-Man. And honestly, thank God for that.